Hello, my name is Kate Arthur, and this data overview is for the administrative team at Autry Mill Middle School, a middle school in Johns Creek, Georgia, grades 6 through 8, as part of Fulton County Schools. Specifically, we are going to review the demographic changes at Autry Mill from the years 2014 to 2017, and also examine the 8th grade milestone data for English language arts and compare that to the district and state achievement. And we'd like to begin to use this data to pinpoint strengths and weaknesses in the language arts curriculum so we can start to build plans for future instructional strategies. So while this is intended for an administrative or leadership audience, it also is intended for the 8th grade language arts PLC. So some of the questions that we can consider while reviewing this data are: what are some of the current strengths and weaknesses regarding student reading and writing comprehension skills? What changes can we make by ELA teachers to create positive change in the classroom, specifically around cultural changes and getting kids to be engaged and wanting to be in the classroom as we look at some of this attendance data? And then how can ELA teachers use this data to inform instructional choices? So those are some of the questions I'd like you to consider while reviewing this data. First of all, an overview here, our total enrollment has definitely increased over the last 3 years, and it continues to do so. Autry Mill is in a sought after district, and so our population is constantly growing. Our enrollment by gender has started to grow a little bit in regard to more males than females, but it tends to be pretty similar. Our churn data, our transiency rate is low compared to the district and has remained pretty consistent. So people tend to come to our district and stay there. The demographics, we are a pretty diverse school, but predominantly white. And if you go back further in the data, you'll see that this trend has just started to go down in the last 3 years, and our Asian population has started to increase. Our students with disabilities, that number has decreased only slightly. And the other number that is of note here is that our number of students who are eligible for free or reduced lunch meals has increased over the last couple of years. It's about 11% right now, and it is at 12% this current school year. Our number of absences, we tend to have a low number of absences. 70% of our students are present most of the time. But we're going to look at this data, the 6 and more absences across subgroups, because there tends to be some trends that are interesting there. And a little bit, slightly more females are absent than males, particularly in the last year. And our absent number in general has increased in the last year. And just as a reminder, these are the demographic subgroups that we're going to look at a little more closely as far as attendance goes, and also milestones data. And our limited English language learners has increased by 1%. It makes up about 5% of our population. The students who are eligible for free and reduced lunch has been steadily increasing, and it has increased this year too in 2018. And students with a disability, that number has just slightly decreased. All right, so the trends in absences, like I said, our absent numbers are pretty low, but they did go up. There was a spike in 2016, 2017, but that spike is most notable in these 3 subgroups. So 52% of our students with disabilities had 6 or more absences, and broken down even further, 13% of this number had more than 15 absences. So that number is definitely something we want to take a look at, particularly these spikes in our language learners, our English language learners, and our economically disadvantaged students. The state of Georgia milestones results, proficient learners capped out at about 35%. That number is similar in Fulton County, and the trends are similar in Fulton County. But Autry Mill, year after year, scores significantly higher than both the state and Fulton County. It's one of the reasons why our enrollment numbers have increased. Our state scores are consistently high. But we do have students scoring at the beginning level. 7% of our students scored at the beginning level in 2014-15. That number has decreased over the last few years. That number specifically is around 24 in the last 2 years. But if we break it down into these subgroups that I mentioned earlier, our language learners are scoring at a much lower percentage rate at the proficiency level, and we have no one scoring at the distinguished level. but 40% of our English language learners are scoring at the beginning level. Our economically disadvantaged students are faring better, but they still aren't performing at the same level as their counterparts. And then our students with disabilities, this has been a focus subgroup for us. And while that number has decreased over the years, this number is still significantly higher, the number of students who are performing at the beginning level. And just to look at that data a slightly different way, 50% of the students 50% of students with disabilities scored at the 50% mark here, while 60% of all students happen to be students with disabilities. And both of those numbers, both of those trends are going down. To look at the flip side of that, our proficient and distinguished language arts learners, those numbers are high, but I thought it would be important for us to look at how that is broken down by demographic. Because I think the perception of our school is that our Caucasian students are the ones who are performing at the distinguished and proficient level. And while that is true, they are doing that consistently. Our Asian population and our students who identify as 2 or more races are scoring at similar levels and higher. So our Asian population is scoring above all other demographics in our school when it comes to proficient and distinguished levels. And if you break that down even further, the kids who are performing at the distinguished level is almost made up entirely of students who are Asian or identify as 2 or more races. So that number jumps around a little bit, but it's just because we're drilling down the data even more. But this is a low number of students who are performing at this extremely high level. And the trends shows us that it is our students, our Asian students and our students of mixed race who are performing at that level. So some of the questions I'd like you to consider as you look at this data is, what surprised you the most about the data and why? And what are some of the inferences that we can make? And after that, what are some of the next steps we can take after reviewing this data? The absence part was one of the things that surprised me the most. It's definitely something that we need to look at a little more closely, particularly that spike that happened in 2016 and 2017 and how it correlates with the number of students who are performing at lower levels on that test. So some of the next steps that we can take is making sure that we are getting kids to school and finding out how we can get information to them when they are not at school. And then lastly, what do we already have in place that can help us support students in reading comprehension and writing? We have several new initiatives this year in regard to using iReady as data collection and also using Readers Writers Workshop. So as we move forward with both of those, we should be pulling more data from iReady and seeing how it compares to Milestone data for these students in 6th and 7th grade. And I would propose that we go even further and take some of the students in 6th and 7th grade who are not performing as well as we would like them to as 6th and 7th grade and show them this data, show them how they're doing in iReady, and then create some support and some classes for those specific students so that we can get those kids who are at the beginning level up to developing or even proficient. And then on the other end of the spectrum, really supporting those kids at the proficient level and finding ways to enhance their learning and engage them in a way that could get them to the distinguished level. I thank you so much for your time in walking through this data with me. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email me or to comment on this presentation. And I sincerely thank you for your time.